I didn't know she still wore that perfume. But I smelled her before I saw her. Sharp, floral, expensive, like judgment wrapped in silk. The glass doors of Orion Logic whispered shut behind me. I stood alone on the 14th floor, lungs tightening against the eucalyptus-laced air and something else I couldn't name yet. Everything gleamed, chrome edges, soft lighting, ambition polished to a shine. The kind of place that didn't have to tell you you didn't belong. It just didn't blink when you walked in. My resume was tucked into a cobalt folder I bought for $7 at a campus bookstore. The corners were already soft. The ink smudged slightly from the heat of my hand. I had printed it on ivory paper. Not because anyone would care, but because I needed to. The receptionist didn't look up as she handed me a badge. "Assessment room C," she said, voice bored. She pointed down a hallway that looked like a runway built for shoes I couldn't afford. I thanked her. Too softly. My voice never echoed right in rooms like this. As I walked, I passed glass walls where candidates already sat. Posture perfect, laughter effortless, clothes that whispered money in languages I hadn't learned. I found the last empty chair, too close to the edge to count. I sat anyway, adjusting the scuffed heels I had polished twice that morning. They still looked tired. Then the door clicked. And everything inside me went still. She walked in like she owned the air. Not fast, not slow, just sure. Navy blouse. Slate trousers. A gold tag pinned to her collarbone. Aubrey. My sister. Her hair was coiled tight, not a strand out of place. Her heels tapped once against the floor, then stopped. She didn't glance my way. Didn't flinch. Didn't see me. Not in the way people do when they're pretending not to. This wasn't pretense. This was choreography. She placed a steel thermos on the table like it was a trophy. Then sat at the far end, perfectly centered between the VPs and the HR rep, like she was born for the geometry of power. My hands tightened around the folder. I hadn't seen her since last fall. Mom's birthday dinner. Aubrey had arrived 40 minutes late and still managed to hijack the entire conversation within 5. She toasted to family resilience, while staring straight at me, smiling like she hadn't just stolen a contract I'd been chasing for 3 months. Like she hadn't forwarded my pitch deck to a friend, who just so happened to undercut me. And now here she was. Director of Systems Innovation. Head of the assessment panel. Pretending I didn't exist. Someone began speaking, an HR coordinator with a carefully rehearsed script. Something about innovation ecosystems, collaborative bandwidths, candidate alignment. The words floated like vapor, meaningless and weightless. I didn't hear them. I heard her. 3 clicks of her pen against the table. Pause. Repeat. The same pattern she used when we shared a room as kids. Back when she'd pretend to do homework just to drive me crazy. Clicking until I snapped. And then smiling like it wasn't her fault. She clicked her pen now. Just once. And smiled. At no one. An assistant moved through the room with a tray of coffee. Paper cups, brown sleeves. That fake polite smile of someone who already knows who matters. He handed cups to everyone. Skipped me. I didn't protest. But I saw her lean toward the woman beside her, mug raised to her lips like a mask. I couldn't hear the words. Didn't have to. The smirk said enough. The woman laughed, soft and pretty and practiced. And then I heard it. Aubrey's voice. Just loud enough to catch. She still dresses like she shops clearance bins on campus. My face didn't move, but my body remembered the sting. Like muscle memory. Like a bruise pressed through fabric. I looked at the table. Traced the grain with my eyes. Breathed through my nose. Again. Again. This wasn't about coffee. Or clothes. This was about erasure. Again. The kind of casual cruelty that wears heels and gold tags and never breaks a sweat. The kind that smiles while pushing you out of frame, and makes it look like it's your fault you disappeared. I hadn't come here to fight. But I hadn't come here to vanish either. I thought about the nights I stayed up at 2 a.m., training on outdated software, building mock systems on borrowed laptops, trying to make something that mattered in a world that didn't care where you came from unless it could use it against you. I thought about the interview prep flashcards still sitting on my nightstand. About how I'd practiced firm handshakes with no one. About how many times I'd convinced myself that merit still mattered. And I thought about her, sitting at the head of the table, in my mother's cheekbones and my father's eyes, acting like I was a stranger. They began calling names. Polished candidates stood, gave answers slick with buzzwords, talked about agile frameworks and scalable systems with the practiced ease of people who'd always been told they were impressive. Aubrey nodded, clicked her pen, made notes. Then they called mine. Lana Cross. She didn't even blink. But I stood. My legs felt too long and too small all at once. My hands shook just enough to be felt, not seen. I placed my resume directly in front of her. She picked it up like it was trash someone had forgotten to throw away, flipped it open for exactly 3 seconds, passed it to the VP beside her without a word. No questions. No curiosity. No eye contact. I sat back down. And I didn't break. Not yet. The room moved without me. Someone cleared their throat. Another shifted in their chair. The HR rep jotted something into a leather-bound notebook. None of it touched me. Not really. I stared at the center of the table where my resume had just been passed like a used napkin. Aubrey's perfume lingered in the air, some expensive scent designed to evoke power and detachment. It smelled like a courtroom verdict. Like old wounds dressed in new silk. I kept my eyes low. Because looking up meant seeing the smirk. I could feel it though. Right at the edge of her mouth, curling like smoke. Then it happened. So, said the man to her left. Miles, VP of something that sounded important but meant nothing to me. He leaned back, his pen pointed lazily in my direction like it was a joke punchline. What makes you think you're ready for the big leagues? The way he said it. Not curious. Not skeptical. Sport. Aubrey didn't give me a chance to answer. She reached across the table, delicate, deliberate, and took my resume again. Her red pen clicked open like a knife. She began to write. One word at a time. Not rushed. No shame. I saw them through the slight reflection in the table's lacquered surface. Wrong major. Wrong look. Wrong fit. And at the bottom, sharp and final. Unqualified. She didn't say it aloud. She didn't need to. She slid the paper across the table slowly, like evidence in a quiet trial. It landed just inches from my hand. I didn't touch it. Didn't blink. But something inside me curled. Not in fear. Not even in humiliation. In exhaustion. This was the same script, wasn't it? Just updated for corporate lighting and nicer fonts. I knew this story. I'd lived its every scene. I remembered being 12 and watching her read my journal aloud to her friends, performing my secrets for applause. I remembered her laughing when I didn't make the debate team, telling Mom I just wasn't quick enough under pressure. I remembered being 17, applying to colleges she said were a little above my league, just loud enough for our dad to hear. And I remembered the last time she'd written on one of my papers. Science homework. Freshman year. I got a B-. She got an A. She told me to stick to emotional subjects, where failure wasn't measurable. I cleared my throat. Last year, I began, voice steady. I led an AI ethics redesign for 3 mid-tier platforms. Oversaw the integration of predictive risk filters that dropped client processing times by 34%. I also, Aubrey cut me off with a chuckle so syrupy it made my stomach turn. Still chasing those little dream projects, huh? She said, turning her head just slightly to the left so she didn't have to look at me while dismissing me. While I was presenting at a summit in London, she added, raising her voice just enough, she was still uploading resumes on Indeed. A laugh. Soft and sharp from across the table. Then another. Behind me. Snickers. They weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They were practiced. Measured. Even Nina, the HR rep, let the corners of her mouth twitch. The assistant who ignored me earlier smirked behind her coffee. And still, I didn't flinch. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I had bled enough times to know how to keep it off the carpet. I looked at Aubrey. Not the director. Not the title. Not the suit. I looked at her. The girl who used to unplug my alarm clock so I'd be late. The one who told me not to wear yellow because it made my skin look tired. The sister who once threw my poetry notebook out the window and called it decluttering. This wasn't new. This wasn't surprising. And suddenly, it wasn't terrifying either. She hadn't dismissed me because I was unqualified. She dismissed me because I had stopped needing her to approve me. I turned my gaze to the man across the table, Miles. His pen still pointed, his mouth half curved into condescension. "What makes you think you're ready?" he had asked. And I knew the answer now. I just didn't feel the need to say it. I stopped waiting for rooms like this to tell me I belonged. The rest of the interview blurred. People spoke. Ideas were tossed around. Buzzwords floated like designer cologne, agile, scalable, lean systems, cross-functional flow. The kind of language designed to keep out anyone who couldn't afford the dictionary. Not a single person looked at me again. And Aubrey? She sipped from her brushed steel thermos like it contained victory itself. By the time it ended, the silence wasn't cruel. It was calculated. I stood, gathered my things. No one stopped me. No one said goodbye. My heels echoed against the tile floor like punctuation. Like an ending no one had written, but everyone expected. In the elevator, my reflection wavered in the steel. My blazer was still open. My eyes were dry. My folder was warm. And somewhere behind that glass, behind those glassy laughs and silent dismissals, my sister was probably celebrating. Because in her mind, she'd won again. But what she didn't know, I was never playing her game. The wind hit me like it knew where I'd just been. It was the kind of cold that found your spine first, then your ribs, then your resolve. March in Minneapolis doesn't warm for anyone. Not even those leaving corporate buildings with paper-thin dignity and heels that ache like truth. I didn't fix my blazer. I didn't slow down. My footsteps echoed along 3rd Street like a secret trying to outrun its echo. 2 blocks down, I slipped into a place I used to call sanctuary, North Loop Bean House. It smelled like burnt espresso and deadlines people meant to meet. The kind of cafe where the barista barely looks at you and the furniture is chipped in a way that feels honest. "Just a drip," I said. "Medium." "To go." He didn't respond. Just nodded and turned. I didn't care. I wasn't here for the coffee. I took the far table by the window, the one with the cracked edge and a view of the crosswalk. Sat down hard enough for the wood to creak. Pulled my folder out of the bag. There it was. Red ink. Bleeding through the back cover like a wound trying to escape. I stared at it. Unqualified. That word again. Not printed. Not typed. Handwritten. Like it belonged to me. Funny how a single word could sound like every year you've ever been overlooked. Like every time you were told you had potential, but no one ever cashed it. I hadn't felt small in that boardroom. Not exactly. I had felt erased. And that was worse. My fingers ran across the folder's edge, stopping where the ink had soaked through. My pulse was steady now, but the back of my throat still tasted like copper and restraint. I closed my eyes and it came back, the apartment in Nepal. 2016. I was sitting on the hardwood floor, legs numb, a half-eaten takeout container beside me. The first freelance job that felt real had just ended. 6 weeks of 3 a.m. edits. A pitch deck I built from nothing. Something that felt like mine. I had been proud. So I showed it to Aubrey. We had wine. I still remember the bottle. Cheap, red, something I'd picked up because she always said it was rustic when I couldn't afford bold. She skimmed the deck. Smirked. "This is cute," she'd said. You always have such creative little ideas. A month later, her firm launched a nearly identical proposal. She presented it at a conference. Her name. Her credits. My concept. When I confronted her, fumbling, stupidly polite, she just shrugged. I never said it was yours, she'd replied, swirling her wine like it was a spell. But if people connect the dots, that's not my fault. That job had gone to someone else. A man she recommended. I spent the next month explaining to confused executives why my design had already been rolled out. No one returned my emails. No one cared. At Mom's birthday dinner that year, my father raised a glass. To my daughters, he said. Aubrey the visionary, and Lonna. He paused. The kind one. Kind. It stuck to me like a participation ribbon. The word people give women when they don't want to say they failed. I blinked hard. Back in the cafe, the espresso machine hissed. A car rolled past, its tires cutting slush with a wet hiss. A Spotify playlist murmured a song I didn't know the name of. My phone buzzed. Elias Everhart. Subject. How did it go? His name hit different. I hadn't mentioned him to anyone in the building. Not even on the application. Aubrey didn't know. Not yet. I stared at the screen. I typed. It went exactly the way she wanted it to. Then paused. Deleted it. Typed one word instead. Fine. I didn't owe anyone the play-by-play. Not anymore. I locked the screen. Set the phone down. Folded the resume again. I wasn't going to frame it. But I wasn't throwing it away either. Not yet. Because that page, creased, stained, rejected, was a receipt. For everything I'd endured quietly. My coffee sat full. Cold. Forgotten. I left it on the table. The barista didn't notice me leave. I didn't need him to. The March wind waited for me outside. It slapped my face like truth. And this time, I didn't flinch. I welcomed it. Because shame is only permanent if you let it settle in your bones. And mine were starting to feel new again. I walked. Not home. Not away. But toward something. I passed a red light. Then another. The same receptionist from earlier blinked when I re-entered the lobby. Miss Cross, she said, standing. Is everything all right? I buttoned my blazer slowly, like armor. I'm here, I said, for the open assessment round. She hesitated. Her eyes flicked over my face like she was searching for the crack in my voice. There wasn't one. She picked up the phone. Please hold. I waited. Behind me, the marble shimmered beneath artificial light. Above me, the directory listed names that didn't include mine. Yet. But this time, I didn't feel like a visitor. I felt like a reckoning. The elevator moved like it knew too much. It hummed, low and slow, carrying me up again. Same floor, same glass, same people. But something had changed. Maybe it was me. Or maybe it was the silence that followed me in. Not the empty kind, but the kind that waits before a storm. When the doors opened, I stepped out like I belonged there. Like I hadn't just been dismissed an hour ago. Like I hadn't tasted humiliation and swallowed it whole. The glass walls came into view first. Then them. The panel. Miles. Nina. Jordan. Aubrey. They were mid-conversation, half-laughing, pretending the day hadn't just seen the slow unraveling of a woman in front of them. Aubrey's laugh was low, polished. A hum dressed in pearls. Until she saw me. Her smirk didn't falter. Too practiced for that. But her hand paused on her mug. Changed your mind, she said, like she was offering me a second helping of shame. You never were good at letting go. I didn't answer. Just walked to the chair I hadn't been offered earlier. Pulled it out myself. Saturday Greg, one of the executives who hadn't said much the first time, leaned back with a theatrical sigh. Well then, he said, steepling his fingers. Since you're so eager to be here, how about we put that brain to use? He nodded to an assistant. A moment later, A thick paper test packet landed in front of me with a sound that echoed too loud for the room size. Paper. Not digital. No calculators. No questions. 15 minutes, Greg said. I nodded once. No thank you. No reaction. Just movement. I picked up the pen. And began. The questions were brutal. Not hard, necessarily, but cruel. The kind of logic puzzles designed to trip you up, to make your breath hitch, to convince you you're smaller than you thought. Systems optimization. Constraint modeling. Architecture chains under timed pressure. But I knew this game. I knew what it meant to be underestimated. To work in the margins. To build in silence. I moved through the pages, methodically. One by one. No hesitations. No crossed out lines. My wrist burned, my pulse tapped against my skin, but I kept going. Somewhere behind me, a chair creaked. Aubrey. I didn't turn. Let's see if her little sociology-adjacent AI hobby gets her anywhere now, she whispered to Nina. Soft enough to pretend it wasn't meant to be heard. Sharp enough that it was. I didn't flinch. When I finished the last question, the timer hadn't even gone off yet. I capped the pen. Stacked the packet. Slid it forward. Greg didn't even pretend to be polite. He picked it up like it was trash. Flipped through the first 2 pages. Didn't read a word. Then, without warning, he tore it in half. The sound, RIP, louder than any insult. Louder than any laugh. The pieces fluttered to the floor beside the trash can like broken feathers. He didn't look at me. Just muttered, impressive penmanship, and smirked. But we don't hire fiction writers. A snort came from someone behind me. I didn't look to see who. I didn't need to. My hands folded in my lap, fingers steady now. Aubrey tilted her head, her voice almost tender. You always were stubborn, she said. Never learned when to quit. I stood. Walked over to the torn pages. Knelt. One by one, I picked them up. Not to salvage them. Not to prove anything. Just to feel them in my hands. To remember what they didn't bother to read. The last page had slid under a chair leg. I reached for it. Before I could grab it, a pointed heel stepped on it, pinning it in place. Aubrey. She leaned in. Just enough for her voice to carry. You'll always be beneath me, darling. You know that, right? Her whisper sliced clean. But it didn't cut like it used to. I looked up, and smiled. Not because I was okay. Not because I forgave her. Because I was no longer asking. I stood. Carefully. Held the torn pages like receipts. And walked out again. But this time, the door didn't close behind me with a hush. This time, it sounded like the end of a story someone else tried to write for me. Outside, the light had shifted. Not warmer. Just different. I didn't walk far. A block and a half. Past the boarded bakery, the parking ramp. Into a printing center tucked between cracked concrete and a flickering neon sign that read, "We print your proof." I stepped inside. 15 minutes. Server logs. Design blueprints. Collaboration threads. Timestamps. Emails. Revision history. My name. Everywhere. I watched the pages print, one by one. Watched the machine build a record of everything they tried to erase. By 11 a.m., I was standing in that lobby again. No badge. No smile. Just the folder in my hand and something in my chest that felt heavier than rage and quieter than fear. The receptionist blinked when she saw me. Third time. I need to speak to the panel, I said, voice low. Now. She opened her mouth, then stopped. She didn't finish her sentence. Just picked up the phone. The call was short. Then she nodded. Go ahead, she said. And I did. The conference room hadn't changed. But the temperature had. It wasn't heat. Not exactly. Just that charged stillness, static in the air before lightning remembers how to strike. They looked up when I walked in. Miles, Nina, Jordan, Greg, and Aubrey, still perched at the table's head like nothing had cracked beneath her. Her arms were folded, her mug full, her smirk polished. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" she said. I stepped forward. Slowly. "I'm not here to beg," I said, laying the folder on the table with both hands. "I came because you left something out." Laura, the HR rep with the tight bun and tighter frown, narrowed her eyes. "And what's that?" I opened the folder. Slid the documents forward. No one reached for them. "My record. My work," I said evenly. "The parts that mattered." Miles leaned back, preparing a dismissive response. His voice was already halfway to condescending when it happened. The door behind me opened. I didn't turn. Didn't have to. I felt the shift before the first word was even spoken. Chairs slid back. Pens stopped clicking. A cough was swallowed. The air sucked in its breath. He stepped in like silence was something he owned. Black coat. No tie. Posture carved from confidence so quiet it made people nervous. His name was Graham Everhart. But no one called him that in person. They just stopped talking when he entered a room. Aubrey stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. "Mr. Everhart. I mean, Graham. Wait, Coulter, you weren't." Her voice cracked mid-sentence. He didn't look at her. He looked at me. Just me. And when he touched the small of my back, barely enough to feel, it wasn't for them. It was for me. "You okay?" Quiet. Private. Only for my ears. I nodded. "Only me," I whispered. Then he turned to the room. His voice was like steel wrapped in calm. "You all seem to know me very well," he began, eyes sweeping over the panel. "What I'm curious about is how well you know her." Greg tried to recover. Tried to breathe confidence into words he hadn't prepared. "Sir, if we'd known she was qualified." "Qualified?" Graham interrupted, voice razor clean. "Or human?" He moved past me, took the head of the table like it had always belonged to him. Then, methodically, he began laying out the papers from my folder. Page by page. Metrics. Architecture chains. Project logs. AI risk modules. Names. Dates. Timestamps. Proof. Unfiltered and undeniable. Lorna Cross, he said, was the freelance architect on 3 of our internal compliance systems. She co-authored the 2021 Ethical Framework for Predictive AI, a framework some of you still struggle to explain to clients. Greg's face lost color. Miles blinked. Hard. Nina shifted her weight like her chair had grown thorns. Graham slid a photo across the table. "This is your Q4 performance deck," he said. "You used this at 3 stakeholder briefings last month." He tapped the lower corner of the image. "Her work. Not signed. But hers." He looked at me again. "Anything you'd like to add?" I scanned the room. Faces that had dismissed me just hours ago now looked like mirrors that didn't want to reflect what they'd done. Aubrey didn't speak. Her lips were parted slightly, like a punchline had died in her mouth. "I wasn't here to ask for a favor," I said softly. "I showed up because I believed I had value." I nodded toward the table. "Turns out, I had more than that. I had proof. You just didn't bother to see it." That last line didn't shake. And when Aubrey opened her mouth, nothing came out. Graham's voice dropped into something colder than steel. "This warrants a formal review," he said. "Interview practices. Compliance. Internal conduct." Greg tried to object. "It was informal, exploratory, not binding." "Then," Graham said, almost pleasantly, "you won't mind if we play back the footage." He picked up the remote and pointed to the wall-mounted screen. No one moved. The screen flickered. Then stabilized. There I was, frame by frame, walking into the room, placing my resume in front of Aubrey. The dismissive flick of her wrist. The passing of the paper like a receipt for a meal she hadn't ordered. Her words, crystal clear on the audio feed. "She still dresses like she shops in college clearance bins." A gasp somewhere in the room. Could have been Laura. Could have been the legal advisor on Zoom. Didn't matter. They all heard it. They all saw it. Next came the scene they thought wouldn't be recorded, Aubrey interrupting my credentials. Greg flipping through the test packet like it was a joke. The rip, the tear, the audible violence of it. Then her whisper, "You'll always be beneath me, darling. You know that, right?" It hit like a gavel. When the video ended, the room didn't just fall silent. It fell heavy. Even the hum of the HVAC system sounded like a verdict. Laura was the first to speak. Flat. Steady. "This isn't just bad judgment," she said. "This is a liability." Aubrey flinched. Greg opened his mouth, but Aubrey got there first. "She planned this," she snapped, her voice pitching high. "She wanted it all on record. This was calculated, manipulative." She turned to Graham. "I introduced you to her," she cried. "I brought her into this room and now you're acting like I'm the villain." I raised one eyebrow. And when I finally spoke, my voice didn't rise. It lowered. Quiet. Final. "Yes," I said. "You introduced me to him. And when he chose me, you made sure no one else did." No one moved. No one defended her. Graham looked at her with something that resembled the last ounce of grace. "So," he asked softly, "you admit to interfering with her employment?" Aubrey's voice cracked. I was protecting the company," she stammered. "You don't understand. She clung to me for years. She only got here because of me. I didn't blink. The only nepotism here," I said, "was you protecting yourself from being compared to someone you never thought would rise." Laura slid her notepad away. No one objected. No one even breathed. Aubrey's voice dropped into a murmur. "I wasn't trying to destroy you." "No," I replied. "You were trying to erase me." Her final attempt came with a hiss. Aubrey reached for her phone, slammed it on the table like a weapon. "She's not innocent," she barked. Her voice cracked on the edges now. "Unraveling. Look at this. This is what she sent a client last year. Called herself a walking disaster in heels." She flashed the screen. "An email. My name. My signature. My company tag. It looked perfect. Forged perfectly. Except it wasn't. I didn't flinch. Didn't ask for it back. I just reached into my bag. Pulled out a black binder. Slid it across the table. That email," I said calmly, "originated from her IP address. Logged in under her temporary admin pass. 2 nights ago." My voice didn't rise. Truth doesn't need volume. It just needs space. Here's the server log. The silence wasn't stunned anymore. It was resigned. Confirmation in quiet form. Graham didn't blink. "Forging credentials to defame a team member," he said, "is more than unethical." He turned. "You'll be hearing from legal." He didn't pause. "Effective immediately, you're dismissed." Aubrey's jaw clenched so hard I thought something would snap. But security had already entered. No handcuffs. No yelling. They didn't have to drag her out. Because the room was already done with her. And for once, so was I. She tried one last swing on the way out. "You think you're better than me now," she spat, her voice breaking into pieces. "Just because he picked you." I looked at her, truly looked, and felt nothing. No rage. No joy. No vindication. Just air where weight used to be. "No," I said. "I'm just done being beneath you." When the door shut behind her, it didn't bang. It hushed. Like the room had been holding its breath for years and finally exhaled. Graham stood still for a long second. His fingers resting on the closed binder like it had gravity. Then he turned back to the table. "I moved to reinstate Lana Cross," he said, his voice even. "Effective immediately. Full-time. Project lead authority." He wasn't proud. He wasn't emotional. He was procedural. And that made it powerful. "All in favor?" Laura's hand rose first. Then Miles. Then Jordan. The legal advisor. Even the assistant who wouldn't look at me 2 hours ago. Every hand. No objections. Nah, the HR rep stood slowly. You're being offered the role of lead strategy consultant for the ethics compliance wing, she said. Her voice was composed now. Controlled. The position was previously held by... She didn't finish. I looked at the corner office. The glass one with skyline views. Aubrey's old seat. Then back at Nah. No, I said softly. I'd like a desk near the dev floor. A beat of silence. A nod. Surprised. Maybe impressed. Graham met my eyes and smiled. Not the corporate smile. The quiet kind. The kind that says, I see you. I stepped forward. Signed the contract. My name didn't shake. Just before I turned, Laura slid a small note across the table. I opened it. Handwritten. Soft script. We're glad you're finally where you've always belonged. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The elevator down felt lighter. Not because the fight was over, but because I wasn't carrying doubt anymore. That weight had never been mine. It belonged to her. To every voice that tried to reshape me. And now, I was done making myself small so others could feel tall. The city hadn't changed. Minneapolis still pulsed with gray wind and loud traffic and the loneliness that lives between buildings. But something in me had shifted. I walked 3 blocks before I realized I was still holding the torn test packet. I stopped in front of a quiet bookstore. Tucked under an awning, I opened my bag. Pulled out a thin roll of tape. Clear. I hadn't known why I brought it. Until now. I sat on the edge of a stone planter. And began taping the pieces back together. Not to repair it. But to remember it. Every rip. Every stroke of red ink. Every moment they tried to make me disappear. Later that afternoon, I arrived at my new desk. Not on the top floor. Not behind glass. But tucked beside the UX team and back-end devs. Sunlight pooled in a crooked shape across the desk. I pinned the test to the corkboard beside my monitor. Next to it, the resume. Still creased. Still bleeding red. I didn't cover it. I didn't hide it. Because that wasn't failure. That was firewood. Proof I'd paid the price. And survived. My phone buzzed once. A message from my father. I didn't see everything before. I'm sorry. I stared at the screen. Let it sit. Then locked it. Not from anger. Just clarity. He didn't get to rewrite the story just because I finally stood up in it. The rest of the day passed in something unfamiliar. Quiet productivity. No whispers. No eyes watching me from the side. Just the hum of effort and shared screens and people who were building things, not breaking them. I unpacked slowly. Ceramic pencil holder. Tiny brass bird from Mom. A photo of a dog long gone but still mine. Then, last thing out of the bag, a folded napkin. Old. Wrinkled. Scribbled on in pen that had almost dried out. I'd written it in 2020 after a failed pitch meeting. No one sees the quiet builder until the building outlasts the storm. I pinned it above the resume. 2 truths. Side by side. An hour later, there was a knock at the doorframe. A girl, early 20s, maybe, stood clutching her resume like it was an apology. Wrinkled. Nervous. I recognized her. From the glass wall earlier. She looked at me like I was a lifeline. They said I could meet the project lead, she said breathlessly. It's you. I smiled. Not triumphant. Just peaceful. Yes, I said. Come in. She stepped forward. Stiff shoulders. Eyes wide. I knew that posture. I had worn it for years. I don't know if I'm qualified, she blurted out. I nodded slowly. That sentence hit different now. So different. You showed up, I said. You kept showing up. That matters more than anyone here tells you. Her shoulders dropped. Just slightly. Not a smile. But something like hope. And as we sat and talked, about systems theory, team culture, the space between resumes and reality, I realized it had never been about Aubrey. Not really. It was about the rooms we let others keep us out of, and the chairs we were never offered, so we built our own. And sat down anyway.